Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm so glad that you were able to join us for today. My name is Doceli Anton Georgie, and joining me this afternoon is Elizabeth Henry. She is one of our most recent counselor additions to our Stitch Ministry Family Counseling Office here in San Antonio. We're really excited about having Elizabeth with us. She brings with her a trauma-informed background. She has a history of working with foster care families. So she's worked with a lot of parents and a lot of children on helping to increase positive communication. And so you'll see more about Elizabeth's passion today. She shares with us her tips on positive parenting and communication. I'm going to start our presentation today by sharing my screen. If you'll bear with me for just a second while I do that. Okay, can everybody see this? Elizabeth, can you see this?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is, we represent Stitch Ministries again, and this presentation will be offered by Elizabeth Henry, who is supervised by Sharni Beck, and myself, Doceli Anton Georgie. We wanted to put this up here because we want to bring your attention to how parenting and child development come together. We want to be able to grow our children in their capacity to trust, love, and foster resilience. And how we parent our children affects how they grow and develop. So these are the objectives that we want to accomplish today. The participant will learn about different parenting styles. The participant will learn how to develop and maintain positive relationship with the children while understanding different developmental stages. And the participant will learn how to engage, reward, and cultivate communication through positive parenting. I put this question up here because I want you to consider as we go through this presentation what style of parenting you have. I also want you to think about and consider what parenting style you were given from your parents as you were growing up. So think about those two things as I share this YouTube video. It will give us some information about parenting styles. I'm going to stop sharing this screen for a minute and I'm going to turn on the YouTube video here.
Oh, Doceli, I don't know if the volume's working.
Okay. Let me go back and share this again. Hang on just one second. Go. When I practiced it a little while ago, the sound went through well, and now I'm not doing the sound well. So let me start back up. I apologize for the interruption here. Here we go. Here we go.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Jodie Benvenist, a psychologist and a parenting author, and I help parents get to the true heart of parenting. In this video, we're going to talk about parenting styles and which parenting style works best for children. We know from research that parenting is really important for children's outcomes. In fact, the neuroscience literature really shows us that the relationships our children have when they're growing up and their environment have a big impact on their growth and development. We also know from research that there is a parenting style that is best for children. We can actually divide parenting styles into 4 main categories. It might be that you use one or more of these different parenting styles at different times, but you also might have a dominant parenting style that you rely on, particularly if you're tired or stressed. The authoritarian parenting style offers children lots of structure and boundaries and discipline. Children who grow up with the authoritarian parenting style can be quite obedient, but they can also lack self-worth and not necessarily have great well-being. And that's because this parenting style can be a little bit too harsh and lack a bit of warmth and love. The authoritarian parenting style doesn't allow children to make their own decisions. Parents really want them to obey, to do as I say, because I told you so. They tend to focus more on punishment than guiding and teaching their children good behaviour. They can also parent based on their mood and can fly off the handle rather than parenting based on the situation or what their child's done. And at school, they can have really high expectations of their children, but sometimes they don't really offer the love and support the children need to do really well at school. With the authoritarian parenting style, children might be obedient and they might do what you say, but they also might fear you, which creates a disconnect between you and your child and isn't based on that loving relationship that we really want to have with them. Authoritarian parents don't always take into account their child's temperament or their child's stage of development. So they might have unrealistic expectations of their behaviour. They might expect a 5-year-old to do something that they're not capable of doing until they're at least 12. And then they may punish the child because they haven't done what they've asked them to do. But really, that child does not yet have the developmental skills they need to be able to do what their parents ask them. With the permissive parenting style, it's almost the opposite of the authoritarian style. So parents who are permissive are very warm and loving and affectionate and very responsive to their children, but they don't always provide the guidance and the structure and the boundaries that kids really need to learn discipline and good behaviour. Permissive parents might give in to their children. So if their child gets upset because they want another chocolate biscuit, a permissive parent will just give them another biscuit. Permissive parents aren't always great at setting consequences and following through with actions. So they may say that a child's only allowed to have an hour of screen time, but then when it comes to the end of the hour, they don't follow through. Permissive parents don't always teach their child about how their own behaviour, their child's behaviour might be impacting others. So their child might hit or snatch or bite another child, and they don't intervene and then teach their child how to behave in a more appropriate way. Permissive parents don't always take into account their child's temperament or their stage of development, and they don't necessarily realise that children really do need those boundaries and structures at every developmental stage so that they can progress through those milestones and help their growth and development. Children who grow up with permissive parents can feel loved, but they can also lack self-discipline because they've never been taught discipline. They can lack those social skills about how to play well with others, and they can sometimes also be a bit anxious and insecure because parents haven't set up those boundaries for them. And when it comes to school, they may lack the structure and the focus and the boundaries that kids really need to be able to do well in their education. Children need to learn. Disengaged parents might attend to their child's basic needs, but they won't necessarily meet their child's deeper needs. They tend to be a little bit more engrossed in their own life and their own needs, and they can sometimes be neglectful. They don't always provide the structure that children really need, like it's time to go to bed now, and it's time to do your homework, and it's time to cook a good meal and sit down and eat together. And they don't always provide the love and warmth, the affection, the cuddles that kids really need to thrive. Children who grow up with disengaged parents can be socially withdrawn because they haven't learnt those social skills. They can be quite anxious and insecure because they haven't had the boundaries they need. They can also be out and about getting into trouble and hanging out with the wrong crowds and skipping school because they don't have someone looking out for them and supervising them and providing the guidance they really need. At school, their parents probably have very low expectations, low expectations of them achieving, but also of even attending, which means the kids may be at school or they may not be. Disengaged parents aren't always there to help with their children with their homework, supervising how they're going, and really helping them to succeed at school. The parenting style that's best for children is the supportive style. It's a style where you're warm and you're loving and you're affectionate, but you also create structure and boundaries for your children, and you guide their behaviour. You don't focus on punishment, you focus on guiding and teaching and helping them to learn good behaviour. Supportive parents really listen to their children, they ask them questions, they look at life from their point of view, they explain things, they have discussions, they allow their children into decision making. Supportive parents also allow their kids to grow and learn themselves. They let them gain independence and skills. They don't do everything for their children. We need to actually help our children to learn for themselves rather than being overprotective and doing everything for them. Supportive parents set boundaries, they follow through with consequences, and they do it pretty consistently, or as consistently as possible, because that's how children learn. They learn much more quickly the more consistent we are. Supportive parents are flexible, and when they're parenting, they really take into account the situation, their child's temperament, their child's stage of development, so that they can really be guiding their children's behaviour and making the right decisions at the time. Supportive parents really encourage children to have a go, take risks, and even make mistakes. And the best thing to do is to actually help children learn from those mistakes. So go through what happened, how they can do things better, and what they can learn from the situation. Children who grow up with supportive parents are self-confident, they feel capable, they're emotionally mature, they've got good social skills, and they enjoy better happiness and well-being, which really sets them well up for adulthood. And at school, they are really well supported, loved, and have the structures in place to try their best and to really achieve. Our parenting does really matter. We can have a really strong, positive, wonderful influence on our children's outcomes. So what's best for children? It's about being warm and loving and setting those boundaries, guiding their behaviour, and most of all enjoying your relationship, because really that's what parenting is all about, developing a strong and loving relationship with your child.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that screen and I'm going to go back to my presentation. All right. So the YouTube video that we just watched was a more concise presentation of what we're going to move forward with here. And this is an infographic that we put in our presentation just to give you a little bit more clearer picture with pictures about our parenting styles that we're going to be talking about. I've added this information here because I wanted you all to have written information about the video that you just watched. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these slides. I do want to point out here that, again, an uninvolved parent really is unaware of what's happening in their child's life. Their children spend a lot of time alone, and their home isn't safe or secure. And I know that in homes where we have single parents or where we have parents that have to maintain 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet at home, this might be what the parenting style might look like. But there are ways around this parenting style, and that we can do by bringing in others to help parent, like aunts and uncles and grandparents who can help teach and guide our children. So an adult who grew up with an uninvolved parents would really have trouble forming relationships, and they would have limited ability to interact with others. Permissive parents, again, are going to just allow their kids to really kind of run the house, and they are catering to their children rather than setting structures for them. So parents will avoid conflict with their children. They want to be a friend to their children rather than a parent. And they can use rewards and bribes to influence their child's behavior. This is probably helpful in the short term, but definitely not helpful for the child in the long term. And what would an adult who grew up with permissive parents look like? That adult would have poor social skills. They would lack discipline and motivation, academic performance, and they would probably have issues with authority. The authoritarian parent is the parent that depends a lot on the because I said so, that's why statement. They rely more on punishment rather than consequences in guiding their children through making good decisions. And they're mostly cold and unemotional. So there's a lack of connection in the home from the parent to the child and vice versa. And an adult who grew up with an authoritarian parent would probably experience low self esteem, limited ability to engage in social situations, and would associate obedience with love. The authoritative parent would be the person that uses structure, balance, and organization. The structure has flexible boundaries, but it also allows the child to express their opinions and make mistakes. And this parent would also be the parent that would be guiding them through how to recover from making mistakes. So if we think about um, life in general, as parents and as adults, we make mistakes every day, right? But we have the ability to be able to bounce back from mistakes. And so, how do we do that? And how do we teach our children to do that in our home? That's the kind of space that we want to be able to offer our children at home. So, this parent does have strict and regimented rules, but the rules are there to keep the children safe, right? We offer consequences for choices, not just a penalty or a punishment. We reinforce learning experiences about how to get better. And so once we have a child who is making negative choices, we help our children walk through, um, what did you learn from this experience? What can you do next time that will help you not make this choice again? And so that gives the children an opportunity to think about the choices that they're making and to begin to think about the future. Um, how are my choices going to affect me tomorrow instead of just thinking about today? So, communication in this home is promoted clearly and concisely. So, the children know what the expectations are at all times. Children also feel safe coming to the parent. And sometimes this is really hard because as adults, again, we tend to rely on telling our children, you need to do as I say and not as I do, right? Or do it because I said so. And so those kinds of statements send the message to our children that your opinion isn't valued and that your whatever you have to say or your thoughts don't matter to me. But in this situation, in the authoritative space, we have a child that feels safe coming to the parents and expressing their emotions, which is really important for children. So, an adult who grew up with an authoritative parent would be well adjusted. They would be able to communicate well with others, and they would have a high level of self esteem and self discipline. So, again, think about the skills that you want your child to have when they leave your home one day. This is the part where Elizabeth will take over and talk about relationships, communication, and rewards. Elizabeth?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Just making sure you can hear me. Jocelyn can give me a thumbs
We
up.
can,
Okay,
yes.
awesome. Okay. Well, Jocelyn, thank you so much for breaking those down. That sets up kind of for our conversation of what's next. How do we lead into that authoritative parenting, right? So let's shift our focus to learning methods of developing and maintaining that positive relationship and what that looks like and how to do it practically. So this looks different also in every season because our kids have different developmental stages and different needs at each season. So we'll talk a little bit about those developmental stages and different needs they may have along the way as they grow up. But I want to start with these 7 components, and they can be applied to any kid at any age. And I think it's really important to kind of hone in on here. So, first of all, being present. We are probably more present with our kids than ever we have been before, but we're physically present, right? And so, looking at not just being physically present, but how can we be emotionally and mentally present with our kids? We're seeing them in a lot of quantity, but how do we look at quality time in that? And so, how can we be present for our children? Having an empathetic lens. Empathy is such an important ingredient for making human connection with our kiddos, and it isn't sympathy. And so there's a difference here. We talk about this, and it's a really important difference. I hear some parents, when I bring this up, there is a concern of, well, I don't want to feel sorry for my kid or have sympathy for them. But it's about trying to imagine what their situation feels like for your child, and that's empathy. So when we have empathy towards our kids, we let them know that their experiences and perceptions are important and their perspectives are important. And children need to be heard and understood, just like we do. One of my favorite things to say is kids are people too. As we understand that, just as we need to be loved and seen, so do our kids, and especially from their caregivers. So having an empathetic lens, celebrating your child's strengths and their capacity to learn and develop. When we begin with what's going wrong or what we think our kids aren't doing, change seems impossible, if not difficult, not only to us, but to our kiddos. And so when we start from a place of parenting our kids from their inherent strengths and what they're already doing well, it's a lot easier to go forward and to try and do better again. And so being strength based in our parenting, frankly, makes parenting easier, but also more intentional. Delighting in small moments. Um, there's a lot of moments we're having, little moments, new moments right now in the pandemic you're probably having with your kiddos. And these are important, and delighting in them. I love that word. Because that's not only doing this something because I have to or I'm obligated, but it's a joy to be around my child. And kiddos feel that and they see that and they know the difference. And so it's also showing that your role is not just a voice of authority in their lives, but you're modeling what relationship looks like with loved ones and peers, not only now, but for them in the future. And we need that trust and connection before we can begin to talk about parental correction. So the next one is being curious about opinions and passions of our kids. One of my favorite things to say with kiddos when they talk about something, they say, oh, it doesn't matter, is if it matters to you, then it matters because you matter. And that's so important with our kids to understand, even if it's a topic we're unfamiliar with or something we think is really minimal in our grand scheme of things, because it matters to our kids, it should matter to us. And so, really having that empathetic lens and leaning in. Um, Shelly talked a little bit about this in authoritative parenting, but missteps are an important part of the journey, especially for us as parents and how we deal with that and model it. And making sure to repair and model apologizing for our kids is such a gift to our kids. And also for us as we get to repair and heal that relationship with our kiddos that we so value. So again, this is going back to modeling those healthy behaviors and emotional health. When we mess up, we admit that we're human and we too can make bad choices. We aren't perfect, nor do we expect them to be perfect. What happens also is we have an opportunity to verbalize our emotions in a really healthy way, to take responsibility for our actions and model that, and also seek to repair the relationship. And when we do that, we're telling our kids our relationship matters to us with them. This shows kids not only it's okay to mess up, but we're also a safe place to come to when they do mess up. And then the last one is investing in your kids' love language. Love language, it's probably something you may have heard along the way. People talk about this at work. You may have read a book about love languages. If you're new to it, we'll talk about it more in detail here in a little bit. But what I'll share is that it's a way that we feel love uniquely. And there's a lot of different categories, and we'll go over them in more detail, like I said. But a big part of it is we each receive love in a different way and need love in a different way. And it's figuring out what form of love does our kid really respond to, and how can we pour into them, not only love them, but love them well. So we'll go on to the next slide here. Like we said, at different markers, we have different developmental needs. And so I just want to show the connection between where our kids are developmentally and how we can love them uniquely at that age. So if you'll follow me at that first bullet point, so they show more independence from their parents and their family at this time. This can be scary as parents because they're kind of branching out. But there's a way to love them in the midst of that that's so important for their autonomy. So, helping your child develop a sense of responsibility in new roles within your family as they seek independence, creating opportunities for them to contribute to your family as a team, right? To be one of the team. Learn better ways to describe experiences and talk about their thoughts and feelings. They're able to talk about it more. Talk with your kid about their world and ask the whys behind their feelings. Challenge them to do that because they're at a place where they can do that now. Having less focus on oneself and more concern for others. A lot of times when we hear this, we're like, oh no, that's insecurity and that's a bad thing, and we're comparing and those kind of things. And that can happen in unhealth. But there's a beautiful thing here where they're looking outside of their own needs and looking at the needs of others around them. And so a way we can encourage that is to encourage them to help people in need, to recognize others' needs, and to serve alongside together. I know there's a lot of ways to serve our community right now, and there's a lot of opportunities to do that in creative ways. So if you have grade school age kids, this could be a really great way to kind of pour into their interests right now. So middle childhood age development. We'll start again at that one. Start from stronger, more complex friendships with peer relationships. You see them probably, and we probably see cliques, but they're kind of creating those little groups and peer relationships. And it's so emotionally important for them to have those friends, not just a buddy, but a group of people they belong to. And often it's especially their same sex that they gravitate towards. And so how do we react to that? We're interested in their friends. We know their friends' names. Even if they can't see each other right now, we're seeking to be along with them and finding creative ways for them to communicate with their friends. Maybe that means Zooming with their friends like this, like we're doing now. Maybe it has Zoom meetings, maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's writing letters. There's so many creative ways to encourage this and be part of this journey with them. Becoming more independent from the family. So showing genuine curiosity for your child's opinions and values and interests, and not seeing that as a threat. But they're starting to kind of figure out their own world for themselves. The third one, beginning to see the point of views of others more clearly. So they're not only seeing others' needs, but they're starting to realize that not everyone thinks the way that they think. And there's different perceptions here. So fostering your child's ability to critically think about their own emotions and others' emotions, beliefs, and values. And that fosters a lot of discussions about why you believe what you believe as a family, and why they believe what they believe as a person, an individual, and a kiddo, and also how that differs from their friends. That's such an important skill. So move to teenage development. One is have more ability to have complex thought. And so how we lean into that is create or support opportunities for them to use their own judgment and make decisions on their own, while also being available and there for support. So it's not pushing them out of the nest, but it's saying, I believe in you to make this decision, and I trust that you can do it well, and I'm here if you need any help. Number two is develop a stronger sense of right and wrong. So listening to your teen's unique opinion about values without seeing their different views as a challenge to your authority or downplaying them. They do matter. It's going back to they matter to them and they matter, so they should matter to you. But listening to their opinions, not only because they may be very different than yours, but that's part of them becoming whoever they're becoming, and you being able to show up for them along that journey. So being open, being a voice that is willing to hear differing opinions, you're also modeling how to do that when they run into that later on. Express less affection towards parents. Sometimes might seem rude or short-tempered. This is hard. These are the teenage years, right? They're messy and they're loud and or sometimes really quiet. There are always things that we don't expect here. And so And they may look really different than the affection that they showed us when they were a kiddo. And so a big part of this is respecting that your kid is changing and seeing that, respecting your kiddo's need for privacy, and modeling healthy repair when there are outbursts and fights and arguments of a teenager or any kind of thing that they're dealing with. Modeling self-regulation, making sure that we're calm and we're able to model, not also escalating situation, but saying, hey, you seem really upset. Let's bring it down a couple edges. Or let's talk about this in a little bit when we're all a little bit more calm. But modeling that self regulation for yourself. And the kids notice that. They see that behavior and it sticks for them. And it also makes them feel loved and seen. So while we can't control their feelings and responses, we can control our own. So let's talk about those love languages here. And so we have these categories. They may seem familiar now that you see them. They may not. So let's go through them. So physical touch, words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, and acts of service. We often, again, think about these in an adult perspective. So let's lean in and kind of think of these from the kiddo perspective, specifically your kiddo. And so these are also going to look really different for your kid. One, because your kid's unique, but two, because it's also going to really depend on their age. So let's talk about that. So physical touch, the same mean hugs, high fives. Younger kids may want to hold hands. Older kids may just want an arm around their shoulder. Sports and games that include physical touch, basketball, football, those kind of things, even soccer. So those things that are high contact, kids may really crave that because it makes them feel seen and known. Words of affirmation, celebrating their accomplishments, affirming notes, texts, letters. People get so creative with teenagers. They may feel kind of odd and gushy and about getting that in person, and they may not show that they're receiving that in person. They might be, though, and that's important to ask later. But also they may respond to a text message or something written instead. And so figuring out what they respond to best and watching for those signs. Showing
Can I
recognition.
interrupt
Yes,
here?
absolutely.
I know words of affirmation. I think is something that as human beings we appreciate really throughout our lifespan. I was listening to a song today that reminded me of my son. And so while it was on my mind, I shared that song with him and I told him in my text, I am and I will always be your biggest fan. It was a way to connect with my son, even though we were apart. So those are the kinds of creative ways that as we're thinking about him and going through them with our and during our day, just taking the time when we're thinking about our kids, sending that to them because we forget, and it's while it's well intentioned, and if we forget, then we miss a moment to connect. But again, we're separated. But I still had an opportunity to connect with my son by text today. So those are some other ways to think about words of affirmation as you go through your day. And really, again, words of affirmation are helpful throughout our lifespan. So go ahead, Elizabeth. Thank you for letting me interrupt you.
Absolutely. I love that example because what that's doing is it's incorporating it into your daily life. And that's something that is natural and doesn't take a whole lot of effort. And that's what I hope that you see in these is that some of them are planned and thought out way ahead of time. But a lot of these, you'll see these natural if you have the lens looking for these moments and see what really gravitates towards your kids. You'll see these moments pop up everywhere. It's just choosing to say yes when they occur and also building them in our daily lives in those little moments. Maybe it's when they get home from school. Instead of jumping to what you learn at school today, maybe it's I'm just so grateful that you're home and I'm really excited you're here. Just little things we can do. So get creative with that. Quality time. We are spending a lot of time together probably. And some of us are and some of us aren't. And so maybe we're farther away from kiddos for certain situations out of state, or there's a lot of situations where we're not able to see certain people that we really love. So encouraging to think of creative ways to spend that quality time with people, whether that means a phone call or on Zoom, or if it's with your kiddo between just you and your kiddo, making sure that it's quality. And so, like I said, putting away the phone, and maybe not both of you watching TV, but doing something together, eating together, that's a big one. That's really natural, part of our schedules. But a big thing is encouraging that time together, just pure time. Even when we may not have a lot of it, dedicating 15, 20 minutes where it's just their time is so important. And we can make time for that. Yeah. So encouraging them to, I love these. You can kind of see how their developmental kind of fits into ways you can encourage them in these little moments too, of helping them serve others, but doing it together, doing anything you do together. Participate in activity that they're passionate about. Maybe you aren't too passionate about it, but doing something that they enjoy, so they see that you're interested in what they're interested, therefore they're interesting to you. And allowing your child to be the expert and to teach you a new skill or about a new topic. That's so fun because it makes our kids feel competent and their expertise, and that you really value their opinion. So it's doing all those things, a lot of at once. And that's what you'll see a lot of these doing. Gifts, looking specifically, so not just buying those things that are really expensive if we're not able to, but maybe it's cooking a meal that they really enjoy, or doing something that they enjoy that they don't get to do often. So get creative. Acts of service. We can feel like parenting feels like an act of service sometimes. And what I'll say to that is, it's different because the intention is different. We care for them because we love them and we want them to be safe. But an act of service is something that we're intentionally going out of our way to show that we love them and that we see them. And so this may mean making a special breakfast before school, helping them with a chore, getting creative. And so as we continue here, I just want to clarify here with them, these are ways that we build relationships. That is different than doing something as a reward. I want and hope that you do these things regularly to show that you can, that your child is valued and loved. What I want to emphasize here is that love and affection is not earned by your child, but loving your child in the way they need is necessary and not something with conditions. And so this goes back to love is unconditional, right? And that we love without expectation and getting something back. So we do these things even when things are difficult, when kiddos have hard behaviors that are going on and we're struggling. And we uphold those healthy boundaries though, and those consequences, both negative and positive, and creating that healthy structure. And we're consistent. But I do want to say those love languages though can inform how we use rewards and what rewards they may really like. So it may be words of affirmation and praise. It may be an activity they like to do or a gift, but we'll talk about that in a second. So we're going to talk about rewards and how they nurture positive outcomes. I want to clarify, bribes and rewards are really different. A bribe is something you do in the moment to get a kid to do an activity. A reward is something that you've already thought out and is you've thought out, and it's a kid knows what they're working towards or what to expect, and it's consistent. And so those are very different. And so for rewards, I love this quote from the 5 love languages of children. Love looks for the interest of another. So does discipline. Practice unconditional love and then discipline. And I love this because if we know the interests of our kid, it means we know our kid well and we've spent time with them and we know them. And so when we parent through negative discipline alone, there's an essential lack of trust and connection and commitment between the child and parent. And effective discipline needs to ensure that the child's love tank, you see that tank on the side, the love tank is filled prior to any form of correction. I think also a big thing about rewards is the way you respond right after your child's behavior makes the behavior more likely to happen again, or less likely to happen again. Sorry. Disciplining by reacting to negative behaviors alone communicates what you don't want them to do, but you need to react to positive behaviors to say what you do expect of them, and also communicate those expectations prior. And then rewards and positive reinforcements clearly communicate what you expect of your child and allows the child to make that positive choice again. Absolutely.
Or
And so,
before, I'm going to interrupt you again,
yes.
Elizabeth. Before we move on from this slide, I want to focus on the word discipline. And Dr. Gary Chapman, in his book, The 5 Love Languages, equates discipline to training. And prior to reading that, I always, in my mind, equated discipline to punishment because of the way that I was brought up. But if we think about discipline in terms of training, then it changes how we respond to our children's behavior. Instead of offering a punishment, what we're really thinking about is what can I do to train my child to respond differently or make different and better choices in the future? Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that's such a big part of it. And when we think of discipline, we often do think of punishment. So I think that's such a great reminder and kind of flips the coin on us as parents. And I think brings some self awareness in those moments of, is this punishment or am I teaching out of love, and is it positive for growth and guidance?
Right.
That's hard to do in the moment, but it comes naturally with practice, and growth of that self awareness. So as we move on, resiliency is really important as we grow, as we raise kiddos. Let's talk about what resiliency is. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from stress, adversity, failure, challenges, or even trauma. Resilient kids also make healthier choices, and they avoid unhealthy risk like alcohol, drugs, unhealthy relationships, and harmful behaviors. So that's all. That sounds great. We really want resilient kids, right? And so resilient kids are more likely to take healthy risks, like trying out for a new team, making friends, maybe taking on a leadership role. And they don't fear that because they don't fear falling short of expectations. They know they can try again. They're curious, brave, and they can trust their instincts. And so, a thing that rewards and positive communication do is they raise independent kids, but also interdependent kids. If there is a positive action, then that means that we have a reward, which means that it's not just a kid that's in the role, but we have a response. And so there's two of us working together. It also grows, and here I want to say independence is different than isolation or disconnection. And so that's a big part here. Self confidence as well. I love this quote from a book we'll kind of refer at the end, is Building Resilient Children. It says, self confidence is rooted in competence. So children can't gain genuine confidence without experiencing their own competence and know that they can do things well. And that's what rewards show them, is that, hey, you did a good job. And so growing that sense of competency as well. And lastly, relationship. Like I said, this is a sense of belonging, to want each other, and investment in each other, to have these expectations and to meet them and to respond to them together. So you both is a back and forth here. And I want to say also how we're responding is often in praise, forms of affection, and rewards. And so that's naturally going to grow your relationship and trust together. So let's look at the elements of implementing rewards. Docelia, I love what you said of just kind of those natural little moments, because I think that's so important here. Catch them being good. Once we start looking for good behaviors, we'll see them. And once we start looking for, great things, we see them. But if we're just looking, we have that lens of what's going wrong, that's really what's easily seen. And so making sure that we're reinforcing that good behaviors and we're looking for them, but also looking for great qualities about our kids. Because it's not just the behaviors and their achievements or their grades that we're praising. We really want to make sure that they know they're loved just as they are and for who they are. Being genuine, labeled specific praise, set expectations that are age appropriate and child specific, and be invested in your child's motivations. So, what is their love language? How do they respond to love? And what motivates your kid? What's a reward they'd be excited about? So let's talk about types of rewards here. So there's going to be affection, praise, attention activities, and reward programs. So affection, that's probably affection and praise are probably some of the easiest ones to do. They're so natural. Hugs, high fives, the smile, these are free. These are things that we do all the time naturally, probably, but we do them intentionally when we do this. And so praise, like I said, label and specific. It's not just about achievements and actions alone, because that over time can communicate their value is based on their obedience, like Docelia said, with that authoritarian parenting. So some examples of this was, you're such a great helper when you put all your toys away. And that's an example of a task they did. But also another one could be, you're so curious and a really smart kid. I learned so much from you. And so that's a really great one too. Attention activities, maybe doing something a little bit extra that they enjoy or show that they really enjoy, playing a favorite game. And that all probably looks really different in quarantine. Maybe those things that you had in your back pocket look a little different now, but I'd encourage you to get creative and have your kid help you get creative. That's a big part of that. And reward programs are tracking your success along the way. So for little kiddos, it could mean a sticker board like we see, so they can physically have that. It can also be, I've seen people do a gym jar where they get little like different colored rocks and a kid gets to put, if they put 10 gems in the jar, then they get a reward at the end for small tasks that's age appropriate. But for even teenagers, you can, on iPhones, I know you can share your notes with someone, and you can add, both of them can add to it. So I've seen teenagers and parents have access to the same notes tab on their phone, and the kid kind of says when they do their chores on there, and the parent's able to see, and the kid is keeping track of them. So that's some autonomy and choice in that too. And the parent can send a text of like, "Oh my gosh, that's great," and all those natural things that that are just creative and just take a little bit more of intentionality as we sit down and say, "What can I do to love on my kid and encourage them to do better and be more resilient?" And so that's all I have on my side, Doceli. Is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I did actually want to add a little bit on the bullet point for attention and activities.
Mm,
I want to focus on attention for teenagers.
yes.
And I hear teenagers often saying or dismissing even friendships with their friend. So sometimes teenagers feel like the conflict that I'm having with my friend right now is probably babyish, or it probably isn't really important in the big
Mm,
picture. But I want to emphasize that the attention that you give your teenager when they are expressing their concerns to you is offers them the opportunity, one, to express how they're feeling, two, what you're saying to them is what you have to say matters, even if you think it's small or it's not that big a deal, because it's important to you, it's important to me. I can, as a parent, get distracted by my phone when I'm having a conversation with my child. And if I'm not listening to him, I may respond by saying, uh huh, uh huh, uh huh. And my child has actually called me out on not paying attention to him when all of my responses are, uh huh. And so I've given my son a safe space for him to be able to call me out in situations like this. One, because I do need reminders from time to time that I'm not really paying attention to him. But I also want him to feel safe calling me out and saying, what I really need you to do is put your phone down and listen to me. So I share that with you guys because I want you to know and understand that even, I, as a counselor, even though I have the tools and the experience, I still, more than I'd like to admit, fall short of parenting well every day. But if I'm making progress, then at least for that day, I've made a connection and I've bonded with my child in a way that is significant to them. So we're not looking for perfection in at all in the way that we relate to our children. We're looking for progress. So pat yourself on the back if these are some of the things that you're already doing. And if they are things that you aren't already doing, then we want to encourage you to pick out some of these things and pick out one thing that you're going to implement this week to increase your connection with your children. So thank you for having us. I'm going to stop sharing here and take some questions if we have any. Otherwise, we've been really blessed by the opportunity to be able to share this information with you. We hope that you find it helpful.